here are the things that I worry about going forward 10 years later. I was asked in the one interview I did on September 11th if I got any peace or closure moving forward. I was perched with all the media on the top of the rooftop of a building looking down at Ground Zero, and I turned to my interviewer and I said, there's a huge frozen zone around Ground Zero right now, put in place by probably the best police commissioner in the city of New York, Ray Kelly, because we have a serious terrorism threat, and the only people allowed in that frozen zone are 9/11 family members. But I had to walk several blocks because we have a serious terrorism threat. And Ray Kelly does not respond to bogus threats. And how can you say, do we have peace and closure, is 9/11 behind us, when 9/11 families have to go through massive security and see snipers on the rooftops of the buildings? The three things I'm worried about now are political correctness, the challenge to free speech, and the infiltration of America by the Muslim Brotherhood and their front groups. We just had, and some of these other speakers are going to go into much depth with these issues, so I'll just briefly mention, we just had the Obama administration release a national counterterrorism strategy that doesn't refer to Islamists. They are, quote, violent extremists. And we have Congress in the Peter King hearing, which I attended, including the KKK and Christian militia in the threat to America. We had a DOD report after the Fort Hood massacre that killed 14 people. It's 14, by the way. One of the people who was shot died later in the hospital, and that person's never counted. I'm big on counting victims. 14 died. 31 maimed and injured by an officer who gave out cards describing himself as a soldier of Allah, who gave PowerPoint presentations justifying jihad and was emailing back and forth with one of the leaders of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, al-Awlaki. Nevertheless, our commander-in-chief went to Fort Hood and stood in front of those families who just lost loved ones and said that what happened here was, quote, unimaginable. Not to me and not to Geraldine sitting over there. The second thing I worry about is free speech. Again, we'll have, I think Deborah's going to be talking about the OIC, who is collaborating with this administration on a PR campaign to fight Islamophobia. The OIC wants to criminalize speech, and I can't imagine that that would ever happen in this country. But I do believe that, I don't believe that we will ever have hate speech laws here that are similar to what we're seeing in Europe. But I do believe that there is self-censorship going on here. And I do believe that we have propaganda happening here. This is yesterday's Washington Post. This is an above-the-fold artistic photograph inside one of the most radical mosques in Falls Church, Virginia. And if you open up to the jump, this is all rehabilitating the image of this mosque. And one of the questions they're asking is, two of the hijackers on my brother's plane attended this mosque and got spiritual comfort from the previous imam, who's now one of the leaders of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. One of the questions they're asking is, gee, was this imam radical when he was there? What they are leaving out is that, some of the people who founded and attended this mosque are now in prison, and that imam also was the spiritual leader of these hijackers when he was the imam in San Diego. That's all left out of this piece. So I have to ask, is the reporter just a bad reporter? Or does he have an editor blue penciling him? Or is it a narrative that they're trying to create to beat the American people down? The third thing I'm worried about is the infiltration. And the Muslim Brotherhood, whose strategic document was uncovered in 2004 in the FBI raid, and which was introduced into the Holy Land Foundation trial in 2007 and 2008, which lays out very specifically what their aim is to do in infiltrating America's premier institutions, its educational institutions, its cultural institutions, the military, Major Hassan, the government. They have been remarkably successful in this settlement process. And I think if you need any evidence of this success, just go to President Obama's Ramadan speech last year when he stood there and actually lectured the American people about tolerance, about religious tolerance, as the leaders of Muslim front groups were sitting before him in that audience. Hamas front groups, ISNA, an unindicted co-conspirator, sitting in the White House as he gave that lecture to the American people, which was beamed all over the Muslim world. And then the last thing I will, the last bit of evidence I'll give about the success of infiltration is the Ground Zero Mosque. The imam that was initially associated with that project, and I have no reason to believe that he won't bounce back to it if Saudi Arabia or one of these countries eventually funds it once the brouhaha dies away, which it won't, by the way. Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf was sent as an ambassador to the United States all over the world as a representative of an American Muslim. What the media would not print about this man is that he is a principal player in the Perdana Group, a Malaysian organization. By the way, Cordoba Initiative has offices in Malaysia, a Malaysian organization that was one of the chief financial supporters of the Gaza flotilla. He is a founder of the Sharia Index Project, advocates for Sharia in this country and dual court system here, says that the U.S. Constitution is not inconsistent with Sharia, partnered with the International Institute of Islamic Thought, the IIIT, and ISNA, the Holy Land Foundation unindicted co-conspirator, allowing them to publish his book under their logo and web address and give it out at Georgetown, one of their Georgetown mosques. That book was titled A Call to Prayer from the World Trade Center Rubble, Islamic Dawah in the Heart of America post 9/11. I've said that he supports the dual system and the Sharia courts. He said the United States, this is all from his writing. This is not my interpretation of what he says. This is what he is saying. And he's much more forthcoming and honest about it when he publishes in Malaysia. He writes a regular column in Malaysia. He says that the United States should create a cause of action for Muslims in the United States so they can sue for insults to religion. He says that Muhammad was the first feminist, and yes, he does, and that the veil is freeing for women. He said after the controversy erupted, we had people going and I guess spying on his Friday sermons, taking notes. And what he said was that I'm now quoting, I am confident that the children and grandchildren of those who are opposing us will one day be Muslim. He admits that there is no Muslim community in Lower Manhattan, but wants to create a, quote, tipping point in the U.S. in which the dominant presence of the Muslim community cannot be turned back, and he wants that tipping point to happen at Ground Zero. He has said that he wants to use the proximity to where almost 3,000 human beings were killed by Islamic terrorists as a leverage. He wants to use the proximity as leverage to draw people to Islam, and his wife, Daisy Khan, actually advocated to the museum whose foundation I belong to put that mosque on our tourist maps at the National Memorial. So, in closing, I will just say that, I'm asked a lot about, over the 10 years, not just on the anniversary, but all these 10 years I've been asked, do I miss the unity of 9/11? The unity of 9/11, among other things, probably kept my family together. The magnificent conduct of the American people. But that's not what I miss. Those attacks were they were done in a fashion to create terror. They were done in a fashion to inflict more than human physical loss. They wanted Americans to see passenger jets slammed into buildings, to instill fear, panic, and uncertainty. And instead, the American people acted with courage, compassion, and moral clarity. That is what I miss. Moral clarity, righteous anger. The words "never forget" must mean something. Moral rectitude, remembrance. I'm not the first person who's lost a brother in an atrocity. I just hope I'm the last. I know it probably will not be, but I'm very grateful to this organization and to all of you for coming. Thank you.
Words can't express our gratitude to you, Deborah, for carrying on the message. And I'm sure your brother would be very, very proud.